Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 38 with a good friend of mine, a guest we have already had on the show. His name is Paul Allen. He is the host of the 9 to Noon radio show on KFAN. You guys know him well. He also calls Vikings games and does that spectacularly in a way that only he can. We talk every Friday on the radio. I usually meet him out at some random Buffalo Wild Wings in the middle of Minnesota and love doing that. And so just like I did early on when we started the podcast, he and I were talking. It's like, yeah, come hop on. So thought it'd be fun to do that. Think you guys will enjoy the conversation. It's always entertaining. It's always fun. And I think you guys will really like it. If you're new here, my name is Alec Lewis. Like I said at the intro, I cover the Vikings for The Athletic, theathletic.com. Bunch of stories over there this week on Sam Darnold, on Jonathan Grenard. We'll have one on Kirk Cousins, have a weekly preview over there. So go check that stuff out. If you are not already, please, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. You can hit that button below. You can hit the little alarm bell, and that'll get our episodes in the future. So please do that if you can. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, we really appreciate that. You can rate, review, do whatever you got to do over there. But thank you guys for being here. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. It is a locally owned bank with a bunch of branches around the area. There is one right next to a Trader Joe's off Washington, I believe, that I go to all the time. So great people over there, very personal feel in the way they do banking. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson are huge Vikings fans. You go in there, you talk to Christy at the desk. She's a gigantic Vikings fan. So just a really good, really great local company that does a phenomenal job with banking. And I mean, everything's pretty easy. You need anything, you need checks, you need online banking, you need a new account, you get that set up really, really quickly. So go check them out at First Resource Bank. Their link is in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple, Spotify. So yeah, go check them out. Appreciate them sponsoring as always. We're not going to waste any more time. Here is the Paul Allen. Paul, it's Tuesday, December 3rd. Welcome to the Alec Lewis Show. How are you?
And good morning. Doing quite well. Tuesdays for me are a little different than they are for you and the scribes, in that you now have 3 coordinator press conferences that, I guess I'm required to watch back at my leisure at Vikings.com, but you guys need to be there to tweet and, give updates and everything, especially at this time of the year for a 10-2 team. So my day's been relatively chill, but not so much for you guys.
When you go back and watch, you're going to see, I asked Wes Phillips a question about the screen game. And I was like, so, early in the year, we were talking about the screen game. It was pretty good. What about of late? And he's like, well, you must have missed that Justin Jefferson screen out wide. And I was like, no, I got to be honest. That was a good screen. So you'll hear a pretty fun back and forth. Wes is absolutely hilarious. But
well, I got a couple of things on that. Actually, one. Frame up or paraphrase the question that you asked.
I said, Wes, early in the year we talked about the importance of the screen game, and I know early in the year it definitely was good. What have you seen from it of late? I mean, what have you seen?
You haven't asked a question that loud at a press conference since you got here. Okay, and when your career, like mine, has been predicated on 30-ish years of wearing headphones for 3 different jobs. Well, at that Friday press conference where I'm trying to, hear O'Connell and hear Kevin Seifert mumble with the greatest mumblers ever, and then all of a sudden you'll ask a question and it'll be like, haven't had Josh Oliver the last couple of games. How do you think he'll help this weekend? And I'm like, I can't, come on. The murmurs are hard to hear for the old guy who's worn headphones all his life. So you never ask questions that loudly.
You say that, but I don't know. I do what I can. Anyway, thanks for being here. The show
is that?
Yeah, I don't know. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. You know Tim Siegley very well. Good guy. You have any comments about? First Resource. You got to have something.
About the bank.
Yeah, the bank.
Yeah, it's a community bank, and I support community banks. I've done some work with something called bankinmn.com over the years, and they really represent a lot of community banks. So that's that. But with Tim, I met Tim Siegley, the president, one of the owners. It's just I don't even know what the title is, but he's the boss of First Resource Bank. I met him the night before the Vikings Giants playoff game, maybe 2 nights before the check down bit. And it was at Mall of America, and it was some pep rally thing. So they brought the cartoon character announcer there, and he came up to me. And there's this podcast, I haven't done it in a while, but called Faith and Goal. And he just, he wanted to meet me because of Faith and Goal. And he's like, we play this for our family, and we listen to it and stuff like that, and we have conversations. And I was like, whoa, kind of making me feel like a low-key Billy Graham here these days, God rest his soul. So that's how we met at that rally. He came all the way in from Stillwater, or from Matamidi, and we've become super good friends ever since. He's salt of the earth, one of the kindest, most generous, loving human beings I think I've ever met. And we're bound by faith, and that's what brought us together with that podcast and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and just both of us learning and stuff like that. And it's morphed into Vikings football and things like that. We're going to see A Christmas Carol at the Guthrie coming up here in a few nights. So yeah, he's one of my best friends, and I'm really glad you brought him up.
Are you performing in the Christmas Carol? I mean, it feels like something. Okay.
There's no prologue for this one, young Alec.
All right, here's what we're going to do. I had this idea. I'm just going to say a topic, okay? And we're going to give a take on it. So you'll go first, and maybe we can alternate. So I'm going to say the topic, then you give whatever comes to your mind, and I've got some stuff. I'm not as clever as you are often, so I'm going to, so I'm just going to, I've got some stuff written down. The first topic, you ready? You'll go first. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. You're going alphabetically. Alan in front of Lewis. Hi, John.
There you go. First topic, Kirk Cousins' return. What is your take?
Well, it still is ballyhooed. However, it's not as the kids would say, it's not as hype as it was like when the schedule came out, and then we're looking at the season trying to figure out what the records are going to be and all that, and then I think they swept Tampa Bay, and then they just put together this awesome divisional record, and I'm like, damn. So I'm not following them that closely at that stage. So like Lorenzo Carter and some of the other great
Jarrett.
Thank you. Yeah, the defensive tackle, one of my favorite players. Over the last 10 years. He's a game wrecker, but he's always cool to watch. Grady Jarrett. So there's that. Now, coming up to the game on 9 to noon, KFAN, and, just kind of looking at social media and starting to talk about it with people, I guess Kirk's playing so badly right now that I think people within the covenant, like O'Connell on KFAN at 11 o'clock every Tuesday, hesitant to say certain things simply for Pro Football Talk, or somebody taking a morsel, it could be anybody, and making it big. So like I framed it up to O'Connell when we did it Tuesday at 11 o'clock. 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions the last 3 games. All right, so you start there. You know this because you ask more questions to more coaches than me. But then, followed it with, the 4 before that, 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and they won 3 of those games. What's changed? Or as you would ask on a Friday, what's changed? I don't really even know if he answered the question. He started talking about Kirk and his days here and everything. That works too. But it's Kirk, like I had Bursich on Monday, because he does adversarial film breakdown Monday morning to put it at Vikings.com. And he's like, he looks old. He just looks old. Spearfish Sammy with the media relations department and I were going over some nuance for the game calling depth chart today because this game is ballyhooed. And he hit me with some scrambling number. And you're in the next gen Pro Football Focus covenant, so you probably already know it. I didn't. And it's like out of 400 some odd or more dropbacks this year, he's only scrambled twice. And then you're like, okay, well, let's look at Flacco. Well, let's look at Stafford. Well, let's look at Peyton Manning when he was near the end. You get that bit. Just, quarterbacks who are similar in certain ways. And their numbers weren't that low. So I'd really like to know what's happening to lead that man to 4 interceptions against 0 touchdowns with a pick 6 right in front of this game. And I don't talk to him or text with him nearly as much as we used to. I ain't going to ask, but I would just like to know, and I'm really, really excited to see how he plays against this Flores defense where he can be jittery. And I love Kirk, and I'm not talking out of school here, getting out of my lane, but he can be jittery. And, as snoozy as that thing was early in the Arizona game in that building, Alec, it ain't going to be that way when he runs out to the field, and there's going to be vitriol.
No, I agree with you. I mean, and how you started that take in terms of just you thinking that it is still a battle. Like, I completely agree. And I agree with you that the crowd, it was oddly, I talked to a Cardinals writer after that game, and he's like, man, this place is crazy. And I was like, I got to tell you, buddy, like for 2-3 quarters, really wasn't absolutely electric compared to how it usually is. But yeah. I'm in agreement with you in that I think it is going to have the juice. Greg Olsen will be there. So, to me, that totally makes sense. And you mentioned, I mean, everything you mentioned I thought was very valid. Like the scramble
thing. Who cares that Greg Olsen is going to be there?
I like Greg Olsen.
I think he's wonderful on TV, but, I mean, you just dropped that non sequitur in there like it's going to be electric. Greg Olsen's going to be there. Hey, cool.
I think Joe Davis and Greg Olsen being there for the viewers at home and those who are not listening to your radio telecast, which they should be. But I think it gives it a better, like, does it feel like a bigger game when it's Joe Davis and Greg Olsen or when it's Adam Archuleta? It's nothing against Adam Archuleta, but that's just my opinion. You took me down that road. Here's my take on this. This feels Kirk's return at this point, given the 6 interceptions that you just mentioned, it feels like so fitting. The idea that he would hit this inflection point, like just as we're talking earlier today on TV, I'm seeing people say that Michael Penix should potentially be started. I've seen columns written that Michael Penix should be starting. The fact that this inflection point is coming at a time in which Kirk is returning to this team that he left last year, it feels like so fitting because it's so much of his career. Like there are always these inflection points that seem to come at times where it is big moments. I mean, it's him going back to Washington in Kevin O'Connell's first year and performing the way he did there. It's facing Mike Zimmer earlier this year, having struggled before that and performing the way he did. Like his whole career, this better than I do, is like this emblematic story of being doubted, being overlooked, Nick Foles going to Michigan State and then transferring for Kirk to start, and then him making it work in the end. Like that is his whole story, but I think it is very valid to wonder, given, I mean, he's coming off this Achilles injury. You watch him look the way he looks and his inability to move around even more than it used to look. And so, I mean, Brian Flores said, like, he's always responding when his back's against the wall, Kirk has. And so it's going to be interesting. Now, Brian Flores also said, we'll shake hands before the game, we'll shake hands after the game, but those 60 minutes in the middle, and Brian Flores was very, like, politically correct, but I think he wanted to be like, it'll be absolute violence on the field for Kirk Cousins.
But you see what I'm saying there, where you're like, he was PC as football goes. That, it's in chatting with people more so behind the scenes after the Sunday game, a little bit Monday and a little more today. Everybody's being hesitant of what they say, even with me, knowing I'm not go to Twitter guy and be like, shh, so-and-so said this. And I'm like thinking a lot about it. I'm like, why? People know they can trust me and I know how they talk and this is different. So I'm just wondering if he's just really, really bad right now. Like there are things to the whole bit that are people like, hey, I mean, seriously, what is this? Or if somebody's worried about even a morsel getting out there and, it's that extra edge and they're all looking for competitive chips on their shoulders, whatever, it's going to take place Sunday at noon. And, that Michael Penix thing, and I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't even know if it's a story, but you referenced it. If you sit Kirk Cousins in a return to U.S. Bank Stadium, just kick him off the team and pay him his money and let him go. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's kind of like what you put on Twitter over the weekend. You know, you're like, or Sunday at like 1:15. It's like, how dare the Arizona Cardinals sit Kairos Tonga in his return to U.S. Bank Stadium? Who do you think you are? Well, I'm looking at it that way with Cousins in U.S. Bank Stadium.
Yeah, the Kairos Tonga return game. I mean, I guess the people listening to this podcast probably know Kairos Tonga, but I'm thinking, where are you going with that? I knew you were going. So, okay, next take, all right? NFC North chances. What is your take? The Vikings NFC North chances.
Ooh, why do I got to go first on all of them?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
You're the Vox. I'll go first.
But it's your podcast.
I'll go first.
Well, no, because it's like Detroit rightfully should be favored. I can't say prohibitively favored over the Vikings anymore, and a lot of it has to do with, seriously, how many hits can you possibly take on defense, and it doesn't absolutely impact something late in games. So after they lose Malcolm Rodriguez, and there were a couple of defensive linemen, I think, that may have left, and they've lost Anzalone and Hutchinson for the year. Watching the Thanksgiving Day game with Smiley, with Senior Smiley, my son Derek. And these players are going down, and Detroit's so professional that it's like, you know what, they have this win whenever they want this win against this team. But I also said to Derek, the later they get in this game, let's watch these players that even I haven't heard of, and I think I know their roster inside and out. And there were mistakes made, okay? So when you're getting down to the deep twos and the threes and the practice squad Saturday elevations and they're playing 50 snaps, be careful with that. You know, and Malcolm Rodriguez is out for the year. That impacts the NFC North bit. So that's what I'm thinking out right now and would like you to go first.
Yeah. My thought would be it's going to be very tough. Now, I do think as you talk about all of the...
It's not very tough anymore.
Well, the defense aspect is such a valid point. And I mean, you mentioned like the guys that they've lost. To me, defensively, they've got three guys you can really, really trust. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Aleem McNeil. Those three guys you believe in, but DJ Reader's been pretty good. You know, Carlton Davis has had a solid year. You know, the rookie from Alabama, Terrion Arnold's interesting. Yep. But I think there's no question that this Vikings passing game can attack those guys. What I think also affects it and is in the Lions' favor, the 49ers just lost Christian McCaffrey for the entire season. And so that team, with what they've dealt with, when you look at this Lions schedule, I've got it right here. They play the Packers on Thursday night. That's going to be a phenomenal game. Thursday night.
I think Green Bay is going to win that game. And I'm the one that gets loud 9 to noon, and I'm like, you know, we saw it that Sunday night last game of the season when they bounced Green Bay from the playoffs, all right, 2 years ago or whatever. It's when Dan Campbell took this thing over, and I have no proof this is true, but I just think privately he said to these guys, or he's made it a mandate, that here's where it starts for us. Those guys over there, the green and gold, they've beaten us so badly for so long with those quarterbacks, and now they can't beat us. And not only are we going to beat them, we're going to punish them. And then Quay Walker goes pear-shaped and gets thrown out of the game next year. Now Green Bay beat them on Thanksgiving last year, and that caught me off guard. But when they beat Green Bay, they punished them in certain facets of the game. And with these injuries and everything, and just for some reason, I think Green Bay's getting them at a good time right now, man.
No, I think that's very fair. I think it's going to be a very tough game. Then they followed up next weekend against the Bills, and the Bills are playing as good as anybody. I mean, besides
that's at Buffalo.
That is, I believe it's at Buffalo. Yes,
yeah.
And so they're playing the Bills, but then down the stretch, I mean, it's the Bears, and we'll see what they end up being down the stretch. The 49ers, I think they've had one of the worst. I mean, just like Bill Simmons will always say, year from hell. Like it's felt like that for them this entire season. And then their last game of the year is obviously the Vikings, and we'll see where we're at. But I think, I think this at Seahawks game for Minnesota is going to be very difficult. This weekend, to me, regardless of how Kirk has played of late, I mean, I look at Bijan Robinson. I look at, I think Darnell Mooney's I think their skill players are going to be tough. And then on the back end, Jesse Bates, A.J. Terrell, those guys can be pretty good. So I think it's going to be tough. And then, Obviously, the Packers will be difficult at home. So I think the Vikings' chances. I guess I would say I think they have a chance. Just think it's going to be very tough. That's kind of my
Yeah, I
take.
don't. I like the Vikings a lot this weekend, and I'm straight with the way I shoot on these things. Where if I think it's 50-50, it's 50-50, and I know that they haven't been winning over the public or maybe even themselves within the covenant if they open veins, stylistically speaking. But they keep getting to the finish line first. They keep getting to the winner's circle where everybody's getting their picture taken and the jockey's there going like this. Okay? So they found a way to do that 10 out of 12 times. And that's what matters most, and you know that. But consider this. So you have the snoozer against Arizona, but they're game enough to get there first. You're at the road games. Tennessee was cool, nothing over the top. Jacksonville, a slog, did enough to win. Indianapolis here, there goes Kenny Moore. Okay, but they find a way to win it and don't give up an offensive touchdown. So I mean, it's like we can pick good things and can this be better and the complete game O'Connell talks about. But consider this: in the 3 division games this year, look at their point totals and look at some of the receiver totals and look at how they jumped Green Bay at Lambeau 28-0. Now, I thought Detroit was the best team in the game at US Bank Stadium here pretty much the entire way. The Ivan Pace scoop and score, I mean, that happened and it made it tight. And then they had a better chance to win, than I thought they did, say, an hour before that situation. But Detroit had Anzalone. They just lost Hutchinson. See, with Detroit, so what I'm saying here about these division games is when they get back in the division playing these division games, these teams are so comfortable with each other. O'Connell is so comfortable scheming against these teams. It's just they're different games, man, than what we've seen for really that Bears game, outside of that one were 30 points. So keep that in mind. And finally, with Detroit. Now, I want to see what Detroit does Thursday night, and I know it's a short week, and generally those games are lower scoring. But Detroit had trouble scoring against Indy, and then we all watched Thanksgiving, and that's after a run where they're 50s and 40s and high 30s, and it's greatest show on turf. It's 27 Yankees. It's Crimson Tide when John would watch with Joe Namath the quarterback. Well, that came back to the pack a little bit, and I'm thinking it's like, well, they have defensive adjustments, but they know that they can beat pretty much anybody anywhere by just pushing. They got that push button mentality, and it's legit. Well, we'll see, because when you get 2 games film on something and somebody's starting to do 2, 3, 4 things differently, and they're having trouble getting around it with Gibbs and doing things with Amon-Ra St. Brown and stuff like that, let's see them push through that. Do I believe they can? Yes, but that plays into the conversation where a month ago I'm like, yeah, Detroit is prohibitively favored to win the North. I know the Vikings have won whatever in a row, and here's the record. That team is rightfully favored. They're still rightfully favored outside of that Seattle game, and you bring up a really good point with that. We'll see where Detroit's deep defense gets them at the end of the year. The Vikings are better than Green Bay, and they are closer to the 28-0 at halftime than the debacle that took place at the end of the game. And we'll see how that shakes out. The Vikings are closer to a 14 or 15 win team than maybe I thought a month ago.
It's interesting, and I was thinking about like the Green Bay game and the Texans game from earlier in the year yesterday, and I looked this up, and I'm sure you saw this on Twitter, but 80% of games this season have been decided by a score in the NFL. And so I looked up, so of the 20% that weren't decided by a score, which teams have the most wins by more than that? And it's Detroit has 7. I believe the Broncos have 7. And then the Bills have 6. So the Vikings have 3 in that, but that's still more than average. Like I think that's and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Like, and I'll get to this with the next take because I find this very interesting. But a lot of people have talked about Kevin O'Connell's play calling. Like you see that all over, and maybe it's just Twitter, maybe whatever.
Well,
people
you do
like
with everybody.
Right. But what I was thinking yesterday, I'm like, but how many times throughout his game management of these 3 years have we ever sat back after a game and been like, Why did they challenge that? Why did they call that? Like, rarely can I put my finger on that. Speaking of the play calling, the next take, and this is on you. Kevin O'Connell's play calling, what is your thought?
It's elite. It's high end. It's McVay tree. It's Shanahan tree. It's recognizing he doesn't have all the answers. So tight ends coach Brian Angelico, a red zone savant, you know, and I think Brian has a big say in what happens inside the 20. Wes Phillips now down on the field. Chris O'Hara out of quarterbacks coaching, but a key passing game kind of guy in the background. Kevin is willing to put a staff together like that and willing to work with those people in a circle as kind of a village because he doesn't have to have the right answer. He just wants the right game plan and win. When it comes to spitting him out, I would assume he's unbelievably good. Never really talked to anybody about that, like during the course of the game. But I mean, Kevin, we have to believe that Kevin is, when I say elite, it's simply, I don't like to use that word often, but I think he's high end. And I think a lot of, like all this Jefferson coverage, all right, and it's true. And I know you watch the all 22 of each game. So double and triple coverage doesn't always mean they're right next to the guy. Now I think it might've been the Tennessee game. No, Chicago, Kyler Gordon. There were two Bears back center of the end zone early in the game, right on his hip, and one pushed him down, no call. So he does face that too, but he faces a lot of here's one guy, and then here two, here, kitty, trying to get Sam to take the cheese, which he did against Jacksonville, so they can converge and pick off the pass. You know what I mean, right?
Yes, without question. The here, kitty, of course. That's classic.
All legitimate. This is not Homer announcer saying, Justin's the best, and really just trust me, it's triple and quadruple. No, it is. And O'Connell's on the radio show a couple of weeks ago saying, look, I watch a lot of games. And then I asked him today about Tuesday about, do you ever watch other teams just to see what's out there? And he goes, yeah, early in the week, part of my job is getting the explosive play list from other games. And I'm like, damn, that's pretty cool. But here's the point about Kevin and what really, really impresses me with the way he and these guys put it together. Despite all that coverage with Jefferson, hasn't had a touchdown in a month and a half. What do we have in Chicago? We had that 20, which was really cool late, but like 26?
Yeah, it was like two catches, 20. Yep.
Yeah, with all that, Alec, the Vikings are number one in the NFL at pass completions 20 yards or more down the field, 20 yards or more. I think it's 45. It's around there. They passed Detroit a couple of games ago. Detroit and Vikings kind of alternating, but Minnesota's pulled away by a few from Detroit. So despite taking away what everybody wants for multiple reasons, Kevin and those guys are still finding a way to get down the field at 20 plus. I think that's big.
And you know this, I say this all the time, but explosive plays are the number 2 most important stat to winning. It's turnovers, and then it's explosive plays. From the time Kevin has got here, they have generated explosives in the passing game. My take on Kevin O'Connell's play calling is really like a question. Like, what would be the problem? Like, what is the problem with, I guess, the criticism of maybe not running the ball more enough? Well, they've run the ball 10% more this year than he's ever run it before, and they also have an interior offensive line that, in my opinion, this is me talking, I don't know if it's matched the test all the time against really physical fronts. I'd also say, like what's the problem? They're throwing it downfield. Again, that creates explosive plays, that stretches the defense, and that allows for intermediate passing, which is part of the reason they won that game on Sunday. So, and it also, like, I think there is a vibe of breathing confidence into the players, where that they feel at any given moment that that he has the confidence in us to do this, so we can perform. The other aspects, I think sometimes people get irked by, some of the trick plays in the red zone. But if you look around the league, teams are scoring via those all the time. And so while, yes, it sometimes may come off as like this big brain, creative, he's talked about it on your show on Tuesdays at 11 about like the ego of wanting to design the perfect play. But I think sometimes, like the score that they had to Aaron Jones, that is a really creative design with Aaron Jones leaking through the interior offensive line and being open by a mesh in the shallow cross. So I think, really my take. It's just like, if the problem is, man, we're trying to hunt too many explosives, or we're not running the ball in short yardage behind an interior offensive line that doesn't give you the most confidence, to me, like, those are problems, again, that you live with any given day, considering the culture that he's created, the infrastructure that he's built. I mean, I've said this publicly. I've written it. Brian O'Neill said to me before the season, the report card, the NFLPA, we're A+ and everything. Like, he said to me, Kevin O'Connell is the report card. Like, that's really what he said. And so, that's the subject matter. We'll do a couple more.
Let me add one thing to what you said. Because you mentioned the name Aaron Jones with explosives, and it caused me to think, how about the play? See, there's so many things that are good that don't get hit. And this is not an affront or a shot at Sam Darnold, because, it's like with Cousins early in his run here before you got here. He was missing things, and like people were picking up on it.
Here. I know where you're going. I know where you're going. I'm glad you're going here, because it was so.
Like Cousins was missing things people would see on the TV copy and put it on social media, and it started to bug me because then I went into Tom Brady's all 22. And I found in the first half of a game at Buffalo that season, like within 2 weeks, there's Gronkowski or whomever wide open on the left, and he checks down to some back nobody's, or Burkhead or whatever. And I'm like, it happens to everybody and has over the course of time and never will stop. But here's the play with Aaron Jones on the fumble. With the little pass over, and he never really had it. So somebody said today, look at Justin Jefferson on the deep cross, and he's open. Cool. You can look at Justin Jefferson. I want to look at Trent Sherfield, who never scores touchdowns, zipped over to slot left, took off, and Sam missed him because Sam was protected nicely, could have stepped up, wham, and he's gone. It's an 86-yard touchdown. So there's like, if you're O'Connell off what your question was, and you're like, they're hey, Kevin, or whatever, they're talking about the play calling. What do you think? All right, well, did they see this where there's nothing I can really do about this with the exception of find the exact perfect play with the most nondescript person against the exact defense I wanted? Oh, and the protection was okay? I mean, like, how do you handle things like that,
No, that's why I was glad you brought it. I watched this game Sunday, and it happens every week. When you're watching the film and you can see all 22 players all over the field, the entire defense, it's like watching from outer space. So you see everything. And every week, as I watch these plays, and it's the first quarter, second, third quarter, fourth quarter, on the backside, always. I mean, there are guys running open almost every – you really –
No, it's not every play.
I'm not every play.
Are you talking about Vikings or everybody, period?
No, I'm saying the Vikings offensive system. It's not every play. It's not every play.
Sometimes that stuff's boring to watch, man, because it's like there's nothing open, and it's like, okay, you have to go short and take 4 yards. I was like, that's boring.
No, there's no and I don't want to make it, but I'm saying very, very often, if you watch the film and you're looking at the routes develop, now protection's not always going to be great, and so to have deep concepts with protection, you gotta that stuff has to match up. But I will say a lot of times, as you're watching Kevin O'Connell's tape for 3 years now, there are a lot of guys running open at a lot of times, and I think other teams. I mean, it's always funny. Every person I come on that I bring on the podcast. That is covering another team, they're like, man, Kevin O'Connell. And so I think sometimes, like, you get so caught up in the nitty-gritty because you want to win so bad. But if you think big picture about what this guy has done here, I think it's not – nobody's going to argue it.
Do you think O'Connell would do this? Okay. So think Arizona Cardinals, Drew Petzing, and what you saw up until Kyler went discombobulated and started throwing punts, okay? So, like, if the Vikings are in a big spot, playoff game, whatever, and you are playing a pass rush that has 4 or 5 guys that are unpredictable like you, and they're good, unpredictable like the Vikings defense, and, the coverage is not going to be triple or whatever on Justin, but it's still going to be significant. And here's the point. Arizona against this Flores pass rush, out of division team, not that familiar, stuff like that. He's going to have tricks up his proverbial sleeve. So they went, their running game is different than the Vikings, more powerhouse. So maybe the bit doesn't work here, but they went short on everything. And not in the way Van Ginkel can jump it and get to the end zone. It's McBride 6. Oh, it's 13. It's Connor 5. A lot of, we're gonna keep doing it, and try to frustrate you. So if Kevin faced a situation like that, do you think he would go 12 yards and in to pull him out of it or frustrate him or whatever?
Yeah, and I think so. Now I'd like to see it. So I felt like we saw it a little bit as they went tempo late in the game Sunday. I felt like there was a little more quick hitting TJ Hockenson underneath, but there are times where I agree. I think it's a great question because I wonder, could there be more quick passing? Now, part of the problem is when you just keep everything short, then the defense doesn't have to stay deep, and so you're just shrinking the field. So part of the deep vertical stretch is to literally stretch the field, and it's like an accordion that you're stretching so you can bring guys underneath. I think that's part of why you see so many deep concepts, but it's all tied to protection. And this was another thing I was thinking about Sunday. Protection got obliterated a couple times by a lot of these big time blitzes, and that was, this offensive line, especially in the interior, it's lost one-on-one matchups. It hasn't been perfect, but rarely do you see them out scheme from a protection standpoint. Now you saw that Sunday, and so when they face, to your point, 4-man pass rushes down the road, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that.
Good time.
We're not going to have a ton more here, but
I'll go shorter.
Okay, no, we're both. It's fun.
I'm loving this.
Jonathan Grenard's season. Is it my take or yours?
Well, I'll just sum it up shortly. It's like with Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard. I knew all their names, but unless the Vikings are playing the Texans, I'm not an elite AFC South mind. I may know all the names, but I don't know the nuance. I had no idea what he could do. When Brian Callahan, the coach of the Tennessee Titans, in his Friday press conference before the Vikings beat them, when he went on for 90 seconds about Jonathan Grenard being the most underrated edge player in the NFL, that's another coach talking about a player on another team. It was unbelievable, because he laid out everything perfectly that we may hear occasionally from O'Connell. Grenard is fantastic.
He is I was pulling something up. So I got a text from somebody inside the building, and you're going to make a joke about who that may or may not be.
Yeah, how is Sam Newton?
That's phenomenal. But
how is the security guard who doesn't let any of my guests in on floor one?
So
Just
Jonathan Grenard, I don't know if you recall that last sequence, right? So first of all, Jonathan Grenard on Sunday, he was sick the whole week, by the way.
Oh.
Sinuses inflamed, head cold, out of breath. He was sick the entire week. They rolled with him. He's played the 5th most snaps of any edge rusher in the NFL. He has the most pressures of anybody in the NFL. He's dropped into coverage more than anybody who's as productive of a pass rusher as he is.
Really?
This guy, it's like you didn't know what he could do. Well, the reality is I'm not really sure what he can't do. That's really my take with what he's done. But the point I'm getting, so if you watch that game late, so on second down, he pokes he swoops around the edge, pokes the ball loose from Kyler Murray. Then on third down, he races to the sideline and tracks Kyler Murray down. So then Arizona calls a timeout before that 4th down. So here's what happens. Brian Flores sends a defensive look out on that 4th down. Jonathan Grenard's exhausted. He's on the sidelines. So Brian Flores sends a defensive look that he knows is just a totally deceptive defensive look. They're never going to call that play. So he wants Drew Petzing. This is a Brian Flores thing. He wants Drew Petzing to see that defensive structure to then plan for it when the Vikings call a timeout. So the Vikings call a timeout to get Jonathan Grenard back in the game because he's that important. Nice. And then they throw an entirely different defensive structure.
You know that for sure?
Yes, that is for sure, and that leads to the Shaq Griffin interception that wins the game. So
that's A+ right there, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but that Jonathan Grenard. Really, the take is
get him back in the game.
Nationally, again, I don't know how many people know this guy's name. Frankly, if you were to ask My brother, no way. He knows Myles Garrett. No way he knows Jonathan Grenard. But what this guy has done is deserving of everybody nationally knowing this guy's name. He's not in commercials. He wasn't a first-round pick, but he plays every snap. He does it in every way. I just can't say enough good things about – I mean, he's vocal internally, big leader in the locker room. Cannot say enough about this guy. So,
and like with Blake Cashman too, who's having by far the best season of his career – you don't want to disrespect others, but you're kind of thinking like, okay, well, I know you had Denzel Perryman and whatever else you had down there, but how didn't this work better than it did? Like, why didn't it play more? Why didn't it have the green dot more? Because you saw what happened when he wasn't playing in games. Team's 9-0 with Cashman. You put Grenard in with that and then Van Ginkel, all for the price of Hunter. Wow. That's executive of the year type stuff there.
And Van Ginkel, like I said, Grenard played the 5th most snaps in the NFL among edge rushers. Van Ginkel's 4th. So they're just locked. It's not just the production. It's that they're doing it so frequently and on the field so they can be trusted and they're available. Like it is. Yeah. I mean, it really it's been wild. The last take, there's nothing to do with football. Okay, we're done with that. We've done a lot of Vikings. The best horse race you've ever seen.
That I've ever seen. Well, I've never been to the Kentucky Derby.
That's shocking. I can't believe
the Breeders' Cup a couple of times. I'm going to have to say the very first Breeders' Cup, which I'm going to say it was 82 or 83. I was a sophomore or junior in high school. I had just moved from Washington, D.C. to the Los Angeles area due to my mom divorcing. So it was a transition time for me. But I fell in love with horse racing at a young time there. Jockey like Bill Shoemaker and like some of these big horses, Spectacular Bid, Seabiscuit, Seattle Slew, Firm Dalidar, big names like that a lot of people know. Well, they had like just gotten done racing, so racing was super popular then, kind of like boxing was. And I think I was a junior. If it was 83, I was a junior in high school. So Hollywood Park, which is now SoFi. And I worked at that spot for 5 years in Inglewood, right next to the Forum at Hollywood Park. I was a junior in high school. First Breeders' Cup in the history of the Breeders' Cups was at Hollywood Park. So I went, and I think my stepfather brought me. And the Breeders' Cup Classic between a horse named Gate Dancer and it was Wild Something, Wild Thing, or Wild Again, ridden by a jockey named Pat Day, came right down to the wire together. The first Breeders' Cup Classic, biggest purse, and boom, 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 somebody wins at the wire. Super exciting. I got bit by the 60, 70,000 there. Just like, wow, this is really what I want to do. And I was like 16 or 17. But Gate Dancer, and everybody can find this on YouTube if they want. It would be first Breeders' Cup Classic Gate Dancer. He was such a quirky horse that he wore earmuffs. He had big ears. He had earmuffs because the crowd bugged him. Down his nose, he had a shadow roll, which was about this big because the spots on the track would freak him out. He had blinkers because we only want him looking ahead, not to the right or to the left. He had a tongue tie because the sucker always tried to swallow his tongue when he was running. So you see this sticking out. That was him. But he was a running sucker, man. And he made a lot of money, and it was the first Breeders' Cup Classic, and he pushed Wild Again right to the wire, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. It'd be that one.
See, the thing about you is
I don't – Gate Dancer.
Yeah, the thing about you is I believe you, but like, is that could be – you could just be messing around making that up. I don't really know.
No, I don't want people to waste their time and search first Breeders' Cup Classic Hollywood Park Gate Dancer and not see the earmuffs and not see the shadow roll and not see the blinkers and not see the big old goofball who everybody would make fun of if it were like recess and he was the horse out there. Nobody played kickball with him. Then they get out there on the track and he'd say, "Watch this. Ready!" And there they go.
You're unbelievable. Well, that's it for the Alec Lewis Show. I appreciate.
I love doing this. Let's do it more often. I can be shorter winded if you need it.
No, it was fun. It was good. It was enjoyable. I appreciate you hopping on.
You're awesome.
I will see you soon, probably Friday at a Buffalo Wild Wings in the middle of where is it going to be this week?
We're Savage this Friday. We're kind of local, and don't forget Uncle Tim Siegley, First Resource Bank. Thanks for sponsoring Alec's podcast, believing in what this kid's doing, helping me with my ministry a lot at Canterbury Park with Sally Mixon and Justin Reback. He's helped a lot there. That's really cool, man.
Thank you. And that'll do it for the Alec Lewis Show. That is episode 38. Appreciate you guys being here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Paul Allen, it is, like I said at the top, it's always fun. It's always funny. I can't help myself sometimes, but just to laugh and enjoy these conversations. So I hope you guys kind of pick that up and we're laughing alongside with me and enjoying it. Enjoyed some of the analysis too. So we'll do more of these, PA and I, and others around the market that I always have good banter with. So yeah, please, if you're not already, like and subscribe this on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple. Appreciate you guys doing that. It brings us to more people, and the more people, the more fun we're going to have, both throughout the rest of the season into future years. Like I said, appreciate you guys being here. Check out some of the writing over at The Athletic. theathletic.com. You can find my stuff there on Twitter at Alec_Lewis. In the meantime, thank you guys for listening. We might be back toward the end of the week with another guest that I've looked forward to having on for a while. It'd be kind of a little different episode, but one I think you guys will enjoy. So stay locked and loaded to the channel, to your feeds. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. Otherwise, in the meantime, have a great rest of your week.